Is fear a good motivator? Yeah. Yeah. So why don't we just, I mean, Dr. Peel basically condemned using fear in animal training and the raising of children. And I think he didn't have high notes for it as a management practice. Am I right? Of humans. But fear, you just said fear is a good motivator, so why not use it? How much schooling do you need in order to use fear as a motivator? It's right there, right in front of us, right? We know how to do it intuitively. So why not use it?
No long-term legs.
No long-term legs. The long-term legs of using fear is organized resistance, rebellion, revolution. That's a real big payback for using fear. And we know it in our families. It's totally disenfranchised families. It's parents, mostly fathers, who have abandoned their families. It's children who will have nothing to do with their parents, and parents who avoid their children. Fear got them there. As Kat said, fear is the primary driver for divorce. People will not face discomfort or suffering or change, and therefore, well, let's just break up the family. It's more important for me to protect my feelings and my resistance to suffering and discomfort than it is to protect children or the sanctity of my promise to my spouse. It's the age of sensitivity, and it was started by my generation. The great generation that went through the Depression and World War II eschewed feelings. Feelings were not important. Duty counted, just do your job. And you don't need me to say I love you or spend time with you. And my generation said, that's wrong. So what we'll do is we'll have lots of love. We'll have lots of interaction. And we'll be very different parents. And our feelings are the only things that count. So you even had Spencer Tracy of the old generation saying in a famous movie of the 1960s, in the final analysis, it doesn't matter what we as your parents think about this upcoming marriage. It doesn't matter what we know from life experience. All that matters is how you feel. Well, the problem is how they feel today on the eve of their engagement is going to be different than when they have sleep and someone lost their job and they're not getting along and they discovered that the honeymoon's over. Feelings now change. Well, based on feelings, then we shouldn't be together anymore. If they're kids, it's better for them if they don't see our discomfort with each other. We can justify anything with critical thinking. Discernment will allow you to do this. Executives with whom I've experienced the greatest difficulty as a consultant or as a direct report to them or as their supervisor will say, I don't want to do it because it doesn't feel right, or I don't feel like it. Fear is a feeling. Courage is not a feeling. If you wait to feel courageous, yeah, we're still waiting. Courage is a decision, and it comes from practiced behaviors. And if you don't practice courage, it's very hard to find when fear swamps you, which is why we run, which is why we avoid. We make excuses, we blame, we become angry, we become impatient, we become frustrated. This is the age of sensitivity. It's actually Eastern. It's very Zen. We love Zen because we don't have to make hard decisions in Zen. Let me tell you, virtue ethics requires hard decisions every day. But the more we make them, the easier life becomes. My Asian relatives who live Zen have lives you do not want. Have relationships you don't. It's great escape from continuous chronic suffering. So the Western idea is take the suffering of changing yourself, then get Zen. But you got to go through that first. Brian. How does fear work physiologically? Kat knows this. I teach a graduate level course in this. But when fear strikes us? Is it cognitive? Is it an intellectual process? Right, but is it intellectual? It's emotional, it's physiologic. It's precognitive, it's pre-intellectual. There's no thought involved. So if this were a noisemaker, if this were an artillery simulator, and I said, I'm going to trigger, it's not going to hurt anyone. And I'm going to pull the lanyard, pull the pin, I'm going to throw it behind that leather chair. So even the sound will be muffled, but it will sound like a 105 millimeter howitzer round landing in the room. It'll still be very loud. And I'm going to tell you in 5 seconds it's going to go off. So don't jump. And don't react. Yeah. And when it goes off, what will your heart do? Wait a minute, but we just told you not to let your heart do that. But it will do it anyway, right? Because it's precognitive, it's involuntary. And what does the amygdala do? What do your adrenals do after the amygdala has gotten the sonic signal that there is an alarming noise, even though you knew it was coming? What does it trigger the adrenals to do? Say again louder. Yeah, into your bloodstream. Very fast, somewhere around speed of sound, I think. Mach 1, okay? When it hits your brain, what do you experience? Fear, discomfort, anxiety. Involuntarily, what happens to the blood in your brain? It boils, no. Yeah, you got it, Joe. It evacuates. It goes through the face. Where does it go? And then from there? Major muscle groups, fast twitch muscles, so you can fight or flight. You're thinking fight and flight, that's how you're going to do it. You can run faster than ever before, punch harder than ever before because you have that. You're going to be wild. You may run in the wrong direction, but you're going to go fast. You may hit with unprecedented violence, but you will probably miss your target because this is panic. For light-skinned people, your face turns red with blood. As it leaves the brain, your operating system, to go to your muscle groups. So now you're incapacitated to drive your computer chip that operates you has lost its power. So if you don't have habits of acting rightly under pressure, you will spaz. You'll act out of panic self-interest or fearful self-interest. Fear is a great motivator to get you to move, but not to act rightly. What we know is that slaves, people who are doing compelled labor under sustained circumstances because they're afraid of punishment if they don't do it, what's the quality of their work? Very poor. And if there's any cognition involved, it'll all have to be redone. There is a company in Colorado that builds structures, and a miscalculation was made in these structures and wasn't discovered for a long time. The company thought it was in great shape and discovered suddenly it wasn't because all of that had to be redone. Now, I'm not saying there was slave labor involved in making those calculations, but I would be really surprised if great stress didn't surround the formation of those final calculations. This is how bridges fall and companies fail. Okay. Mouth goes dry because if you're in imminent danger, you're not going to eat, so you don't need saliva. Moisture goes to your armpits and other joints. Why? What's that about? What's the physiologic rationale? Because everything has a reason. Lubrication. If you throw a left jab and a right cross and then a left hook, and you have no oil in Tin Man's armpits, you will rip your skin. Because you're moving your fist at near sonic speed. You'll just tear yourself apart. If you start running, you will tear apart your groin. So fear Involuntarily, fear triggers this response for us to act in the physical realm. But we don't face physical fear anymore. Now we fear relational fear. We fear disapproval fear. We fear conflict, not being liked. And we sweat just like the cougar has landed in front of us. Same reaction. If you haven't practiced as a school teacher using a clear voice to instruct children in the range in which they hear it and will respond, and you see a kid doing something dangerous, if you haven't practiced, you'll shriek, you'll scream, you'll yell, and you will actually impel the child into what you wish the child not to do. Yeah, fear is a motivator, but it's not a good one. If it were, we would still have slavery because we'll do anything to make money. But slavery is a lousy economic machine. It eventually produces rebellion, war, and the death of the slaveholders. And that's been repeated throughout history. So fear works physiologically in ways that if we don't have a planned set of habits and behaviors, it will own us. And I think it owns many of our marriages. It owns many of our relationships between parents and children. It owns many relationships of an intimate nature between people. And it absolutely runs amok in our workplace.